and we'll be talking about all sorts of things with a theme on developing future-ready executives. So I'm pretty sure this is going to be a very popular chat and conversation. Just as a little bit of an intro, if anyone doesn't know me, I'm a co-founder and CEO of Adeption, really obsessed with leadership development, feel privileged to do work that helps develop whole people. Workplace is one thing, the impact goes well beyond that workplace, and get to meet and work with incredible people like Suzanne and many of you who are here today. So a few years ago, I'll never forget meeting somebody who'd been doing some research with Red Bull and National Geographic, and they talked about decoding innovation. And one of the things that they discovered was that highly innovative relationships happen when you have people doing things that are very similar on one dimension and very different on another dimension. The similarity gives you cohesion and connection and some sort of empathy and context. And the difference is where the innovation comes from. If things are too different, they just don't gel. And when I was thinking about Suzanne and introducing this session, that is really what I think Suzanne, in my experience of working together, has led and brings together. So this is exactly what Suzanne has brought together in the field of executive talent and development and the experience. And we'll unpack that and talk about a little bit more, but just in life and work itself, I think. So as a brief introduction, Suzanne's head of executive talent and succession with Salesforce, and has 25 years of experience as an HR leader, a coach, specializing with high performance executives in a range of different industries before Salesforce. She was with Amazon, VP of HR, I should say, at an MBA school as well, and is joining us from Chicago. And it's very lovely to have you here. We've got a few quick questions, but Suzanne, over to you just to say hello and a quick introduction to the group.
Oh, hi, Carl. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. I was really excited to do this session today and can't wait to get into it, Carl.
All right, so let's get into it. This is something that I learned from one of the pieces of work that we did together recently, which was Fast 7 questions. So just as a way to build a bit of connection and have everyone here understand a little bit more about you, I've got 7 quick questions. So let's get into them. The best thing about your city is?
I love Chicago. There is something for everyone. It is about the food, the people, the culture, the museums, and the lakefront. So my favorite thing to do is to run along the lakefront. And despite the city being in the news lately, I will tell you it is still the best city in the world.
Fantastic.
The Bears, absolutely, Roger.
Go the Bears. Fantastic. And what's your dream holiday destination and activity?
Well, Carl, you may be aware of this, and some of you on the line as well, but I have a dream vacation coming up. We are heading, me and my family, my husband and 2 daughters, to Australia and New Zealand in December. So for a 2-week trip, we're super excited about that. Anything outdoors, adventure-y, so hiking, biking. I think we're going to do some kayaking. I'm still trying to talk them into doing the Sydney Harbor Bridge. I'm getting closer, but that's number 1 on my list right now. So
you are coming to the right part of the world for those activities. So that's great. Can't wait to hear how it goes. Changing it a little bit, but keeping in the same theme. This is something my family and I do a lot. If you could only eat one dish, one food, one dish for the rest of your life, what would that dish be?
It's a hard one, but I have to say the first thing that came to mind was sushi. I absolutely love sushi. I met my husband. We were working at a Japanese company together early on in our early 20s. And ever since then, we've just had sushi all the time. So love it.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Enjoy that in Australia and New Zealand as well. The next one is, that we do leadership mindset indicators. And one of the questions in there is a sentence stem, and that is leadership is ... How would you complete leadership is?
Yeah, we started the call talking about pickleball, but I would say I think leadership is really a team sport, and it's all about service. Service, in some case, sacrifice, in some case, bring people together and along toward a shared vision. So it's also about being in service to not only the team, but to the customers, to the organization. to each other. So I really look at it about bringing out the best in people so they can deliver the best results.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I love that. Um, Building into a little bit more of a professional, continuing the theme into professional, what's the best piece of professional advice you've received, or a piece that's resonated for you anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are sort of the obvious ones about being curious and continuously learning. And I think those are really helpful. And I've been, given that advice. For me, I think the most impactful was back when I was VP of HR at the MBA school and really trying to figure out how to balance the needs of the business with the needs of the people. And, sometimes you can over index on either side. And sometimes that's actually required, right? You may be in a very difficult time, COVID. I was at the MBA school during September 11th. And so it was, how do you make sure that you are taking care of the needs of the people? Being empathetic, providing services and support for whatever they need. But then at sometimes you may need to over index on the business. So it's really about being aware and intentional around balance and balancing those two things, which could be at odds at times in a polarity. And especially when you're working with top executives who are often focused on the business. We're in this massive AI transformation right now. So how do you find that balance?
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely come back and explore that a little bit more about the AI transformation and also that balance, because you've shared a few things that I've learned from you before too about that balance. I can sort of sometimes tend to over index on people. And another one of your colleagues said, that's true, Carl, but also useless because unless the business is okay, then we can't look after the people, for example. So
Absolutely.
really appreciate that. I think that's great. You mentioned AI. So AI will make things better or worse for us.
Oh, I am team AI all the way, like using AI as a force for good, 100%. And I think part of it, yes, I happen to be a little bit optimistic, sort of by personality. I tend to look on the brighter side of things. And in this case, though, also Salesforce really has been at the forefront of sort of ethical and humane use. We've had a chief ethical and humane use officer for AI for years. We've written papers that have been presented to, the national government. It is all about trust. So having been educated around, what it takes to focus on building secure and guardrails in place and trust, like I have confidence in that because I've seen it firsthand. But in addition, I just believe it's up to us, particularly if we are working with leaders, to spread the message that AI can be used for good. So we had a speaker, Allie Miller. She's one of the foremost experts on AI, and she spoke at one of our AI learning days. We have these quarterly AI learning days. And she really challenged everyone. Instead of using AI to get a little better at something, she said everyone should be using AI to make things better, to make the world better. And that really, really stuck with me. And I loved it. So I've been challenging myself to do that. It's not always easy, right? Because you still need to use it daily, but how do you actually challenge yourself and push, not just to get better, but to be better?
Oh, wow, that's fabulous. I'm so glad I asked that question. Thanks, Susan. That's really fantastic. And then the final one, because we have a lot of people on this call who are interested in leadership development, learning and development, HR, people matters. I'm sure they've got some, and this will just lead us into hearing a little bit about your background. What's your preference to present, to facilitate, to coach, or none of the above?
I love them all. And I would have to say, though, my heart, my passion lies with coaching. So, an executive coach, all the way through, it's where my passion is. And I just really love helping to unlock the potential in people. And in particular, if they're a leader in a very visible role, I've learned that if I can help them be at their best, the whole system elevates. So I call it, the ripple effect of coaching. And it is just so fun and so satisfying. I had a conversation, a reconnect with a former client of mine who was at Amazon and then moved to another big tech company, and he got promoted to a very senior executive role there. And it was just so fun hearing his story and where he was at and how he got there, And I was there along the ride for sort of the difficulties and the challenges and the uncertainties. And I don't know if I can make it here. And he stuck it out and he's doing great. And so to hear those stories, it's just amazing. And because of the impact too that he'll have on the people and the projects around him. So very exciting.
I've benefited a couple of times from your energy when you're talking about some of those executive coaching conversations you've had. And I think everyone just here has the same as well. So thank you for that. Hey, as we move on, we'll move on now. That's our first fast 7 questions. Thank you for that. We'll move on and start talking about your path to get to this point. I mean, we've sort of themed it from practitioner to executive. I'd just like to, if you could just share a few of your key experiences and things that have happened that have kind of shaped you to get to this point and why you're passionate about this point. For everyone else too, we'd love this to be as interactive as possible. So as we go through this conversation, if something that Suzanne says triggers a question for you, pop it in the chat. I'll try and make sure I can see it. We can just answer those as well so that we can sort of take this conversation where we wish. But yeah, just love to explore your path to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes back sort of early in the days where I was really drawn to the people side of business. So I have 2 sisters, both of them are CPA accountants, and I just knew that's not what I was drawn to. I love business, by the way, but I love the people side of business. So I actually started my career on the HR tech side, implementing ERP systems back in the day, PeopleSoft, for those of you who remember the 90s. And that was really fun for me. Just there's something about technology and the speed of it and the innovation that I really enjoyed. And then I worked my way into more of the traditional HR route and became the head of HR at the MBA school. What I absolutely loved about that, HR you could do anywhere. But if you could do it at a place that's aligned to your passions, it's even more fun. So being in the business of developing business leaders was so fun. I remember going to like senior leadership team meetings and they'd be passing out articles, the latest article from the HBR. And I was like, this is my place. These are my people. It was really fun. And it was relatively early in my career too. So there were, most of the other senior leadership team had their master's or their PhD. They were by far more advanced in their career than I was. So it was also a time for me where I was trying to figure out what I really liked. And what I learned is working with the most senior executives. So the CEO, my boss, and the CFO, and then the chief marketing officer. I realized that if I can help them be at their best, then everyone else around them would benefit. And it actually made my job easier as an HR person because people would come in and, kind of complain about them. And so that was really fun. And then because we were also a business school, I felt it was really important to focus on the culture and engagement. So I set on a mission to become one of the, best places to work. And part of that approach was bringing in our MBA faculty for our own employees so they could benefit from the same learning, because if they knew and understood and benefited from what they were in service of doing, I believed it would help them be better. So we would bring in faculty for negotiations and strategy, and every employee got to benefit from these sessions. So that was really fun for me. We ended up partnering with a pharmaceutical company that was, is a very big company in Chicago, a Fortune 100 company, and they were starting to bring in coaching to their company. So they came to the school and said, hey, can you help us with this? So a few people decided to go to get their coaching certificates. And so I joined in and fell in love with it and never thought I would be a coach. But then in working with my own coach, I decided to go out on my own and become an executive coach, and did that for 10 years. And I loved it. VP and above, leadership development, traveling all over the world. It was like a really fun experience. And I was at a little bit of sort of an inflection point of like, either I'm going to double down and grow this thing really big or potentially go back to corporate. And I had an opportunity to help start up internal executive coaching and a leadership development program at Amazon. So I was like, let's see what happens. And then it happened really fast, actually. But talk about a culture shift, going from like essentially private practice entrepreneur for 10 years to a Fortune 2 company. Like that was crazy. Uh, but also like I'm up for a challenge. I think you have to be in this line of work, right? Be able to adapt and flex and be willing to like jump into the chaos because, that's what it's like right now. Corey can relate. And then, so I was there for a couple of years and during the pandemic, and then the opportunity showed up at Salesforce, and it was with someone I worked with in the past. And so it was an executive development role, and I decided to take it. It was also in Chicago, so I wasn't going back and forth to Seattle. And I've been here ever since for about 4 years now.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm sure so many points of that will resonate with different people. I didn't realize I worked on SAP and PeopleSoft projects early in my career as well. So we've created another point of similarity. The other thing you said I thought was really interesting about using the faculty at the MBA school was something that I heard from Salesforce recently. It was this like concept of customer zero. And I think it was, your head innovation officer or something talking about taking chocolates off the chocolate line before they can get to anyone else. But, which I think is a great way to test innovations and move them through. Just before we leave this one, what would you say is something that having that 10 years of being in business for yourself and that sort of practitioners helped you with, you mentioned sort of dealing with the chaos and the variability, but anything else like when you're now on the other side of the fence, I guess, dealing with vendors and coaches?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. Well, first, I love the experience of really taking ownership and responsibility for your own business. And people would ask me a lot when they started to go out on their own, like, what are your advice or your tips? And I was like, you have to run it like a business. Just because you're a good coach or a good facilitator. And having been in a business school for 10 years, I learned how to do that. I learned how to have a strategic plan every year and monthly meetings and looking at, what's the mix of business from individual coaching to, facilitation. So I ran it like a business. But I think the other benefit was you recognized some partners are a better fit for you than others, whether it's a coaching firm I partnered with or a company or a vendor. And as you know, Carl and Corey and the whole team at Adeption, you've been wonderful partners for us, which is why we keep coming back. And I think the fit with the partnership really, really does make a difference. So I learned that. And then I would also say I underestimated how much working with executives at different companies taught me so much about different cultures and different industries and different businesses. And I loved that. I loved the variety. But when it prepared me for going into Amazon, so Amazon actually is made up of like 300 different companies. So we were coaching leaders from AWS and Ring and Audible and Whole Foods. Like those are all Amazon companies. And so it was almost like coaching within, a whole ecosystem. But having that diversity and variety of experience was really, really helpful. And I think it made the transition in a little bit easier than maybe it sounds on the outside. So
Yeah, that's really interesting because you get organizations that are so large in scope and complexity, having had that experience of different sort of, there's got to be subcultures and things in there, right? So moving forward, one thing that I'm really looking forward to exploring with you is what you've been doing recently. So Salesforce, and I'm pretty sure most of our audience here will be aware, but is going, in my view, and you can correct me, but both leading a transformation of work and how work happens, like digital workforce transformation, and experiencing it internally. And you're sort of right at that junction, the work that you've been doing with senior talent, high potential talent and succession, leadership development experiences, but other things as well. And as a theme that's resonated really strongly, Salesforce has been an incredibly successful organization and has invented many of the ways that software as a service work, and is now finding itself inventing another way of how things work, which brings about a different type of leadership, a different type of development. And you are absolutely in the middle of this. So without leading you any further, I'd just love you to share a little bit about what you've been doing, key insights for the rest of the audience, and we'll probably have a couple of questions that go back and forward in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So many of you may be familiar with Dreamforce, which is our big annual conference. It was just last week in San Francisco, 50,000 people, partners, customers from all around the world. It was amazing to be there and just see the new innovations. One of the things, and you mentioned it earlier, Carl, is that a big part of Salesforce's strategy is to lead the way. And we do that by being what we call customer zero. So we use all of our own products internally, test them out, and and are also leading the way in transformation, how work is changing and how we're upskilling people, because we feel that in order for people to use some of the Agentforce products, they have to know how to actually implement them and embrace them and lead the transformation. So that's a big part of it for us. You called it, I think, eating the chocolates off the line. It's in the tech world sometimes called eating the dog food. I like to say drinking our own champagne because, that's really fun. Um, but essentially for us, it is about the future of work and having AI and agents make things better, but doing it in a very human centric way. That's something that we're really, really trying to focus on. One of the ways we're doing that, we've developed these 10 enterprise skills that we've launched just this year. And it's a combination of human skills, business skills, and AI skills. So we're using sort of a career marketplace for people to assess on their skills, and then we're offering learning to be able to increase the proficiency in those areas. So that's some of what we're doing. There's a team of ours in talent really focused on workforce innovation and the future of work. And they've developed this framework, and it's a playbook that we've shared externally. It's very public, it's out there. We can share it too. It's called the 4 Rs. It's really looking about how do you redesign work? And the way work gets done in this new reality. How can you reskill yourself and your people to be prepared for this new way of working? And then it's about redeploying talent into new and different roles in some cases, and then rebalancing the human and the agent work. So that's sort of the playbook we're operating in. When it comes specifically to my role, since I'm focused on SVP plus, so our team handles anything in the talent lifecycle, onboarding, talent management and succession planning, executive development, executive coaching, retention, and engagement. So for us, I really see our role as how do we help these leaders adopt and embrace the mindsets needed to lead through this incredibly complex transformation that is moving incredibly quickly and is unprecedented, right? So this is the notion of we've brought in adaptive challenges. And what does it mean to lead an adaptive versus a technical challenge? And Carl, you've been very involved with that for our senior executives, and it's really, really resonating with them. And then it's also about how do you help them think about the future and what the scenarios are for the future, and then work on an enterprise challenge to actually bring that future scenario into a reality. What would it take? So cross-functional teams working together on these future scenarios. I also think it's really important to use AI not only personally within my team and integrate it into our programs. It was one of the reasons why, and I know we did not talk about this in advance, but it was one of the reasons why we use the vertical mindset indicator, because it's an AI powered tool. And it was very, very important to us for that, for our executives to experience AI. And this was in the beginning. I mean, this was what, like 2.5 years ago, Carl, maybe?
Yeah, 3. Yeah.
Yeah, 3 years ago. So really early on, like right at the early stages where the wave was starting to hit. And so I think all of those things have been important. And I've had people ask me like, are you teaching your executives like prompting skills? And I don't see that as our role. I see our role as teaching them what it means to lead in this incredible, unprecedented transformation that is going to be historical. So it's about the mindsets and getting people along and challenging and really solving and working on very complex, challenging problems. So I think that's higher level role, and then allowing them to get those skills through our other sort of enterprise level means. So
Yeah, there's a couple of observations I'll make there. It's just really neat to hear you. As like one is that adaptive technical framing has just resonated so strongly, and I don't think you've brought together real thought leaders that have helped share that, which has given it, I think, air cover. And it's very accessible. I mean, all of the leaders just instantly get it. Like we're dealing with a lot of adaptive challenges, and just having that language to separate them really, really helps bring that to the fore. The other thing is using, and you hinted at it, but using the futures sort of team internally. So maybe I could ask you to explore a little bit more on that. But just from my point of view, like it's so easy and it's so important to have leaders focusing on the current challenges they face. But what the futures teams help to do is to transform your audience into the near future and the challenges that will come with that. And that's been truly transformational. I think it's been a really impressive part of the experience and how it's evolved. So yeah, I'd love you just to dig in a little bit more to that aspect, because I think it's pretty unique for a lot of people here as well.
Yeah, we are very fortunate to have a team in-house called the Futures Team. Peter Schwartz is our chief futurist, and he has worked with the CEO Mark Benioff for many years. He's actually written several books. I think one's called The Long Game, and he consulted on a lot of some of the movies out there, very futuristic movies that have been out there. And so he has really helped to get the company and the leadership to see that you have to imagine the future and what some possibilities are. And instead of just waiting for it to come, and it's not about predicting, it's really about understanding what potential scenarios can be. Even the scenario of AI for good or not good is something to think about. What would the world look like if each one of those scenarios, and what would need to be true in order to lead through them? So we are very fortunate to have a futures team. They work internally with our execs and with customers as well to help them plan, think about, write a lot of research and white papers on the future and what that looks like. And I think you hit it head on. I mean, Salesforce literally was a company that had kind of invented the SaaS category. So I think right now they're really trying to make that pivot to more of an agentic enterprise, which is super interesting because I feel like it's a little bit in the company DNA, but the company is much, much bigger now and a publicly traded company with 80,000 employees. It's a lot harder to act scrappy and nimble and entrepreneurial when you're this big. But we're doing it, and it's really interesting to watch.
It's like the you mentioned earlier about business or the people. The thing is that I think talent development in the context that you're talking about it is the business, because
Yeah.
the two are just so woven together. I mean, the strategy is developing different mindsets to actually bring the business to the fore. So it makes the work that you're doing and leading just so incredibly relevant. Um, another thing before we move on to that sort of the stakeholder environment, which I know you've got a lot to share on, a lot of lessons there as well. Just getting these are innovative things. I mean, I haven't seen elsewhere integrating futures work with leadership development, and afterwards you kind of look at it and go, "Dude, I mean, it sort of seems obvious." But another thing is, as a very active participant through this last part of your journey, anyway, I've been really impressed by the rapid evolution. I mean, the what you've led has been adaptive in itself. We've had different speakers, there's been different design elements. At one level, there's been a similarity, but there's been a real openness to experiment live with a very high profile, high cost investment for the business. How do you manage that? How do you make sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, I learned really early on, particularly at Salesforce, that it is all about relevance and value. And I think, sometimes as L&D professionals, it can be tempting to want to bring in something that is personally passionate to you, or you think the leaders really want and need. And I have a story I can come back to about that. And it was an early lesson for me in Salesforce. Ultimately, it is about making sure you are so close to the stakeholders that you are serving that you can deliver something that will resonate and be incredibly relevant and impactful. The challenge right now is that things are moving so fast that things that we may have developed 6 months ago may need to be updated and changed. And so it really is sort of that lean model of like building and iterating and feedback and modifying along the way, but it also means not being too attached or precious to necessarily anything. We had an example of one of the professors from a top university who was the subject matter expert, and he just wasn't landing with participants. So we had to make the decision, like this person who is the most well-known, who literally wrote the textbook on the topic, but he just wasn't landing his delivery method. So we had to, kind of bring somebody else in, and it worked great. And I think that's part of it, right? Just flexing and adapting and kind of meeting the organization where they're at. This is what we do for our customers. So it's what we need to do for ourselves as well. Just be super responsive, understand the needs, design something that will meet their needs and exceed it, actually, and then go from there. So for us, we start every year, we do a round of stakeholder interviews, and we talk to senior executives, we talk to people in the business, supporting the business, HR, finance, marketing, and then we really interview them. What's most important skills? What are your biggest challenges? What are the biggest risks to the business? And we use all of that to inform the design. And then this year, we've experimenting with involving them even more. Some of the key stakeholders with content review, meeting the faculty in person, having the stakeholder participants. And that has actually gone a really long way because they're essentially co-designing and creating, but they're so much more involved that when we had a situation happen, it was with some of our sales leaders. We're going through a brand new program. We were designing a leadership executive program, and the chief revenue officer was concerned about having people out of the business. And they came forward and said, no, we need to do this. We need to go with our team. And because they were involved from the beginning, they were invested in it. And it ended up going really well. So that was a good thing.
That's fantastic. I'm really glad you shared that because it's sort of clicking with a lot of what I've observed as well. It's almost like a continuous co-design experience.
Yeah.
And if you think of your role is not just leadership development, it's talent and succession, and you're sort of building capacity. So it's more porous than just a program or an experience. And I think what you just shared then, I'm personally going to take away a lot from that because that program or that experience doesn't really begin and end. It's an ongoing process. Yeah, thanks, Robert. It's not one and done. And even the stakeholder interviews is part of the process itself. It's informing the process and it is part of it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, actually, what we would say, Carl, when other people were involved, like from the team on stakeholder interviews, I'm like, yes, we're asking them to give us their feedback and perspective, but it's also an opportunity to socialize this program and what we're
Yeah.
doing and build awareness and support and advocacy for it. And so if we're talking to our chief investment officer and we're saying, we're going to cover finance and strategy in this, we want to make sure we're covering what's most on your mind, right? And then he becomes invested and interested. So yeah, it's been a really important part of our methodology, and we do it every single year. And in the case for our sales leader program that we just did, we ended up interviewing 48 SVP plus across the organization to make sure that we understood what the challenges are and where they really needed to go. Okay, here's a question from
Yeah.
Nick. How do you triage and sequence programs at scale? That is a really good question. I would say that it's normally on a year basis, like we're like kind of on an annual cycle. But the thing about us is we can only deliver live cohort-based programs in essentially our Q2 and Q3, because like Q1 and Q4 are off the table. So we kind of have this compressed timeline where we're doing, kind of just a couple of cohorts, like maybe 5 to 7 cohorts in a 4 to 6 month period, which makes it kind of crazy. But it makes it easier to tweak things. And don't forget, for our executive population, we have global scale and we're putting through, maybe 100 at a time, but we're not doing the manager population, which is putting through 1,500 to 2,000 at a time. So I would have to say it's probably a little bit easier for us, but it is something that we have to iterate through regardless throughout the whole organization. And it really comes back to immediate feedback. As Carl and Corey know, we have daily stand-ups every single day. Like, how's it going? What are you picking up? We capture insights that we turn around within a couple of days of a program being done. So insights meaning what came up from what's on these executives' minds most right now. The one I just got back from 2 weeks ago was all focused on we need to experiment more. We're not experimenting enough. We're not operating fast enough. We need to innovate and experiment more. So like we package up these insights and we give them back. So we take the insights, we take the daily stand-ups, we take all the feedback, we do debrief sessions, and then we tweak. Even if I just got back from doing 2 back-to-back sessions, we made tweaks from like Friday to Tuesday because it is about like constant iteration and listening. And sometimes even in the moment, I had a president at our program 2 weeks ago in Philadelphia, like come up to me and be like, we had this super cool experiential learning, rowing on the river and like with Olympic rowers, and it was going to rain. And he came up to me and he's like, what's our plan B? I don't think this is a work. We need to go into the classroom. I'm like, all right, let me just see what our options are. Came back, explored some options, looked at the weather. We're like, you know what? We've consulted with the faculty. We're going to do this. We think it'll be worth it. And if for whatever reason it rains, we'll have a different activity. And it was like literally in the moment, like, and you just do it. And I think for me, it was so easy to do because this guy is dealing with our biggest customers ever. And this is what he has to do for his customers. So I feel like we need to do it for our customers. And it's just a philosophy. And it's fun, by the way. It just means you can't be so tied or attached to doing things a certain way. But I'd be curious from Carl and Corey how you feel about us.
Yeah, well, I mean, I will. There's a couple of good questions coming through too, which we'll explore. But I just wanted to like let everyone know that for such a large organization, what Suzanne's sharing is real. Like the agility and the ability to keep things moving and experimenting is quite incredible. It's more like working in many ways with a startup, and you've kind of got a founder that you're dealing with who can make all the decisions. I think there's something that's really enabling in being able to have a team that is meeting regularly, listening to that feedback, and then trying something. The other observation, though, is it's not random. We were working with Meta a few years ago, and then Facebook before that, and they talked a lot about thrashing, which was just kind of going from one thing to another, which is, can be the dark side of being so feedback orientated. That hasn't been the experience because I think there's this really big, strong digital workforce transformation thread. And Suzanne, we've talked about it quite a lot. What's the red thread? And I think that really guards against that experience of thrashing because that hasn't been our experience. And you have to hold on for the ride as well, which I think is fun. And it makes the experience great. You don't do the same thing multiple times unless it's really good and resonates, like you mentioned, with that language.
Absolutely. And I see Ian's comment here. I mean, I do feel like there is a lot of change and it can create fear. And that is absolutely, I mean, I don't want to paint a picture that everything is, perfect and rosy. Like there is definitely that happening. But I also feel like it's the responsibility of these executives to help really navigate and manage that through their communication, through their empathy, through focusing on those human skills. So we definitely have that too. And I would say having that clarity, though, that is one thing, having sort of a clear sort of North Star. And this is what we're doing. I mean, we launched Agentforce at Dreamforce last year. And we get just really clear messaging. Now it's about the agentic enterprise and we need to be customer zero. And so everyone sort of just like aligns around this common vision and messaging. And that certainly helps. And then I feel like the experimentation and the constant innovating is actually how we stay scrappy and entrepreneurial despite being a large corporation. But it can be really, really messy and really uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people are just figuring out how to navigate that right now. So I'd also be curious to hear how others are navigating the change and the pace and the speed and if you have any strategies too, because it's not easy. I mean, I think people are feeling the pressure right now.
Yeah, hey, legal corrections, just milk, no sugar. Thank you.
I thought we might have had somebody sharing some experience then, but I think it was a coffee order. So, but please do, if anyone has, feel free to come off mute or put a note in the chat, and we can call on you if you do have some experience to offer on there. There's another question there. External.
Yeah. Oh, I do have someone I would recommend actually, in addition to, adaption, do you all do experimentation? Because if you did, I would recommend you. Um, I would say there is a guy, Enda King, who I worked with. Was an innovator and I believe is head of the DOC, the Accenture's innovation program. Uh, he's an amazing speaker. So I think he's based out of could be Dublin. He might be back in New York now, but yeah, sorry, and the king.
And of course, we absolutely do. I mean, experimentation is at the core of the methodology that we sort of talk about. I mean, it's like developing through it. But please do, if we can get we've got the details in there for everyone. You talked about a story around stakeholder engagement and about when things can go right, but not necessarily on one dimension, but not necessarily get the result, and the importance of results. And I think that's been another one of these really strong through lines in this conversation. I'd love you to share that one, Suzanne.
Yeah. Okay. So this was a story. It was my first year at Salesforce. So this is early 2022. And it was like, come develop this brand new from scratch SVP plus program. I remember starting in January and they said, the blurb to describe the program needs to be uploaded in the system and the due date is February 8th. And I was like, I'm here 3 weeks and I have to describe what this program was. Like, that's what I walked into. But thankfully, my Amazon experience had completely prepared me for this. So I was like, okay, I'll do what I can with what I know right now. That's sort of my overall philosophy. And we called it Leading for Purpose. And it was a program that what I wanted to try and do was help, leaders figure out how to solve complex, messy challenges. And we had just added sustainability as our fifth value, and it was splashed all over the company everywhere. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to use sustainability as the lens to which these execs can look through solving complex, messy challenges. And we had done some things we had never done before. We invited customers in. We picked the city of Copenhagen because it's the most sustainable city in the world to have this. We brought in Lego was one of our customers. We brought in some non-for-profits and government. We brought in some consulting companies. We partnered together to help them solve these complex, messy challenges. And that program was delivered in October, right? So think of beginning scratch from, essentially February to October. And it was a great program, like, especially by our L&D standards. So I loved it because it was such a great, the problem was, we were in a bit of a financial crisis. So we had activist investors circling the wagon. We had 6 come in, and this was all bubbling up right as we were sort of delivering. It was like September and October. So we were in kind of a real serious situation financially. And the feedback was sustainability just did not land. Now, I will tell you, if we didn't have that happening a couple of months earlier, it would, it was just the way that the timing with things collided. I will also say that I learned an important lesson for me is that I didn't do a good enough job communicating with stakeholders and participants that sustainability was just the lens in which we are looking at complex challenges through. But they were saying, here we are trying to fight off activist investors, and we're focusing on, sort of environment and how to make the planet. It just was too far. And it was a huge lesson for me that absolutely impacted everything, that I thought it was relevant because it was one of our top values, but it actually it was a way to look at complex challenges, but because we spent so much time on it, people walked away feeling that we over rotated on sustainability versus leadership. And so that significantly affected the way I approached executive development. And I'm fortunate that I still had the opportunity to be there and experiment more and implement some new programs. But that really informed going forward the way that I looked at designing programs. So
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. I'm kind of, part of me is sad that you had that experience just from a personal preference point of view, but I also think it's just such a valuable one to share, and just highlights the importance of context and some of those overstories. I've just been finishing reading Malcolm Gladwell's latest book, where he revisits the tipping point and talks about the importance of these overstories, the narratives. And it sounds like, listening to you just then, there was an overstory emerging of the activist investors that really impacted the environment that that program was sitting in, as good as it is. Talking about that, results and stories, what's been your approach to kind of, like, we talked a lot about stakeholdering at the beginning of designs and building, making the poorest start of the experience. What about out the back end when we're talking about like highlights, stories, right through to awards? Moving from design and implementation to impact, how do you sort of highlight that impact, the measurability side of things?
yeah, well, I mean, listen, the environment we're operating in, resources are really kind of scarce commodity these days, right? So to be able to have to show the value and the impact, which goes beyond sort of what was the experience like for the participants, and really about the stories that come out of it, the impact both from retention, engagement, from increased performance. We right now are in the midst, well, this might be a little technical, but some people might be able to relate to, in order to transition to more of an agentic enterprise and having customers use Agentforce, we have to move away from selling seat-based licenses, which is what made us who we are today, and to more consumption-based. So there is a new measurement metric called net new AOV that we are now kind of really focusing on. And our salespeople have to transition to this new way. So in the program that we do with Leading for Impact, yes, exactly, Amber, like the business models change. And so I mean, the ripple effect of that change is huge, right? So people who we used to charge, so pricing models, what we give our customers, how salespeople are incented and compensated, all used to be on seats and top line revenue. Now it's on net new annual operating value is what it stands for, and net new AOV. So we worked that into our program, and that became one of the complex challenges that our executives actually got to focus on. And so the fact that we were working on that business metric in our program says to me, like, we are delivering value. Like, we could actually impact the business results because we are having these leaders work on it together in a group in person with each other. And they had to report back too to the co-founder as well. So it really is about business impact. But one of my favorite stories that came out of it was we were in Hyderabad doing a program last year, and one of our chief engineering leads had sort of this moment where he's like, wait, if we're going to make this shift really to agents and Agentforce, we should change our name to Agentforce. And he said this like in the debrief, and it was kind of like an aha moment. And that would be a pretty big change for us. But other companies, Facebook and Meta, other companies have changed their names, so it's not out of the realm of possibilities. But it was also just to signify how big the change was. And at the same time, the leaders were also discussing the importance of feeling empowered to speak up, particularly on really big, sort of challenging topics. And so he went to the CEO and was like, I think we should change our name to Agentforce. I mean, that's the short story. And then at an employee town hall, the CEO said, "Oh, this person came to me and said we should change our name to Agentforce." Clearly, we didn't, and we are not, as far as I know at this point. But hearing a story like that and seeing the impact, right? We're like, I was there in the room when that happened. And then to hear the CEO talk about it at an employee town hall was really cool. So I think there's big impact, like the actual results themselves, and then there's impact like these mindset shifts that work their way into the culture and that really do have an impact. And you're like, wow, that like happened at our program. That's really cool. And that's when you know like you're making a difference.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing. I mean, every time I hear that story, it's just kind of like, it's really, really impactful. And we talk a lot about getting more data and measurability into these types of experiences, which is important. But the power of those stories, those single stories, those moments when they can get highlighted like that, I mean, they can really shift an entire environment. So thanks for sharing that. We're just about at the end. So if there's any last questions can come through, that would be great. I'm going to ask, before we finish, Suzanne, to share a nugget, a question or reflection for the group. But just before going into that, what do you see as the next frontier of this work? We've sort of talked quite a lot about moving from programs and experiences and models to sort of creating conditions and environments. I know you've talked about this before. I'd just love you to share a few thoughts about where do we move next when we talk about preparing organizations for success and leaders to run those organizations?
Yeah, I would say it's really feeling like personalized in the flow of work. I know for us, you know, Slack is the place. We just introduced this Slack bot. It is amazing. I'm in it multiple times a day. And so I think it's in the flow of work, but it's hyper personalized. For me, we've been doing cohort based in person, which will continue because we've learned about the power of networking and collaboration and getting leaders from different parts of the business together. I mean, that's some of the biggest value we hear, quite honestly. And so that will continue. But what we need to do to evolve is really start to focus on individual custom development. So, you know, we're preparing a person for 2 or 3 potential roles as successors. What do they actually need? And how can we make it super personalized, super relevant, and in some cases in the flow of work? So I think that's what we're really challenged with going forward. And it's not easy to do. I mean, we talk a lot about, and you know this, Carl, and Nick's heard it too, about performing and transforming at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it's that notion of, you know, we have to help our leaders perform, but we're there to help them transform, even if it means individually as a leader and working on their own work and their teams at the same time as trying to transform the organization. So not easy to do, but an exciting challenge nonetheless.
It is. It wasn't something that was in my mind when we were prepping, but as you know, we asked people to think about a time that they've really grown and developed and become the person that they are. And they generally talk about experiences, work, life events. You know, it's like if it's not developing in the flow of work, it's developing in the flow of life, I think, is the thing. And so what you just shared then is just extending that and actually making that part of the job that we'll do as professionals in this space. So that really resonates. All right, moving into the final one, and then we'll wrap up and tell everyone what's coming next. But a nugget, a question, or a reflection for the group. It's your choice.
Well, first of all, just I appreciate everyone's presence here. This group of people is who I love spending time with. So, I mean, I'm just curious as to how people are thinking about the future themselves. So, what are you doing? What are you experimenting with? Anything new and different? I'm just curious as to what people are thinking about the future themselves.
I think that's great. We've got a couple of moments if anyone does want to share a response to that, because I really, really like it. Dan's also put in the comment there about, oh, is it Mark, around building trust in AI, yeah, helpful experimentation versus AI as work avoidance. This is an interesting one too from Nick. Stabilization after restructures is the focus, repair and trust.
Ooh, I love that. Is this Nick Petrie? Has he been on the whole time and I didn't even know?
I'm not sure. I
Okay.
don't know. I don't think
I
so.
was like,
Nick Allen.
oh,
Sorry.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Hi, Nick. Yeah. That's great. I love that. Stabilization after restructures is the focus of repairing trust. And I think that's challenging too, though, because you have right now we're finding restructure, boom, you just have to jump off so fast and start moving and performing. So that's, I think, one of the bigger challenges is how do you stay focused and stabilize after massive restructure too, right? Like,
One one thing, it was one of the keynotes, the last session that I was with you with Suzanne mentioned that kind of transformation, when it is continuous, is sometimes a bit of a misnomer because it feels like it's going to finish. And I think there's been a theme here that this is an ongoing process, and adaptation is something that doesn't stop. So I think the analogy that was shared is that the bird that flies, that is adapted to fly very, very high, has the same wings and similar feathers. It just has slightly larger nostrils so that it can extract more oxygen. And I think, and that's just this idea, it's a continuous process. And I do think that's one thing that I've seen with you and with the team about like normalizing the restructures and the transformation, because um, no organization is any help to anyone if it doesn't exist. And so normalizing this idea of continuously reinventing.
absolutely. I love that. And I love Amber's comment here about using emotions more effectively to drive clarity and build trust. And neuroscience, absolutely. I mean, I think using more of the human science with the AI technology is going to be a really important factor going forward. So,
Thank you. Hey, high praise, Robert. It's been very easy. Suzanne, I just want to extend a really warm thank you. Thank you for your time, your attention, your focus, your wisdom. Most of all, what you've shared is just, I'm fizzing. I'm literally fizzing. The first time I met Corey, I used that term. I'm buzzing with energy from what you've shared. And I think I can say on behalf of everyone else here, you've given that for us. So thank you very much. For those of you that aren't part of the Global Chat Network, our next guest is Laisha Ward, the author of the book Lead Like You Mean It, Lessons on Integrity and Purpose from the C-Suite. That will be another fantastic session. It was rescheduled from August, so that's coming up. And for those of you in New Zealand, we have a Leadership Action Network breakfast on leading when there's no playbook coming up as well. The links to those will be shared in the chat. But just join me in saying a big warm thank you to Suzanne. Really appreciate that. It's been a highlight of my day, week so far.
awesome. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Great talking to you.
Thank you.